Number of speaker cards that I've received already. If there's anybody who wants to speak who hasn't filled out a speaker card, please do so. That way we have your address and can send you documents, and we can also keep this part of the meeting going in an orderly way.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Mark Welter, and I'm the Executive Director of Golden Gate Audubon. And I'm here speaking on behalf of our 10,000 members and supporters throughout the Bay Area. We were also instrumental in, along with many people in this room, in ensuring that the EIR was undertaken at a time when this project was being fast-tracked. And so we think that this is a very important process. First of all, we're in favor of children, and we're in favor of soccer. We want to make sure that children have access to soccer. But we want to make sure that there's a full and fair hearing of all the environmental issues that that need to be considered in order to make a good decision about this. And we especially want to make sure that that all mitigation measures are fully considered when the various alternatives are considered. Our main concerns are, first of all, that Western Golden Gate Park in the master plan was originally intended to be left essentially in a natural state, and that this development compromises the natural state. We're concerned about the loss of habitat, especially because this is along the Pacific Flyway and is an important natural area for migrating birds. We're concerned about the impacts of 60-foot light towers, and both on clear nights and also on foggy nights, the impact that has on not only safety, but also migratory birds and other wildlife, and also the disruption created by increased traffic and tripling the number of users or the user hours in that part of the park. In summary, we want children to have access to parks and to soccer. We're not fundamentally opposed to artificial turf fields in other places. We are in favor of improvements to the beach Chalet Soccer Fields. But we are concerned about this project at this site, and we see this as an extraordinary natural resource that needs to be protected, not further developed.
My questions are all focused on the tire crumb infill in particular. And I have a bunch of questions, and I'm probably going to be sending something into you. But in general, I'd like you to identify all the toxins and synthetic material that are in this tire crumb, including volatile organics, phthalates, heavy metals, and other materials that might be toxic, and cover all the effects that these would have if they either leach into the aquifer, or if people come in contact with them, or animals come in contact with them by breathing these things, eating these things, or getting these materials in contact with their skin. I'd like an investigation, for example, of the effect of these materials on, if they're inhaled, ingested, or otherwise, in contact, on both humans as well as other animals. I'm also concerned in the toxics area regarding the materials that are going to be used to maintain this material. There are cleaning solutions that are needed. There are disinfecting materials that are needed. I'd like to have the EIR address the toxic considerations regarding those things as well. Finally, I'd like to have the EIR discuss what's going to happen when this material has to be disposed. My understanding is that the disposal of tires is very well regulated by various departments in the state of California. For reasons I don't understand, crumb rubber is exempted from all of the tire disposal regulations. So, although tire disposal is very tightly regulated, I'm not sure that there are any regulations that control the disposal of crumb rubber. I'd like the EIR to discuss what kind of precautions are going to be taken to make sure that the crumb rubber infill is going to be disposed of safely and won't create a hazard. Finally, I'd like the EIR to discuss both the long-term and cumulative effects of exposure to the materials that are in the crumb rubber as well as in the artificial turf. I know there are studies that have been done that talk about short-term effects or off-gassing of some of the volatiles and the leaching and so on, but I think it's important to look at the long-term and cumulative effects of this material as well. So I'd like the EIR to cover that. Thank you.
Thank you. That was Jean Barish. If I don't say...
Hi, my name is Terry McDevitt, and for 40 years I've been taking care of the athletic fields and meadows, etc., for Golden Gate Park, etc. And what I'd like to see from the EIR is quantifiable stats about things like the oxygen loss that the grass produces. 6 square feet of lawn produces enough oxygen for one person for a day. If you extrapolate that out, there's about 400,000 people a day that's produced oxygen. It's also an air cooler, and the stats from the UC Davis turf studies program show that normally around the lawn you have about a 5-degree drop in your air temperature, whereas near the plastic it can be 10 degrees on a cool day and up to 40 degrees higher on a hot day. This heat pump is going to affect the other flora around that field in every direction. Also, the lights are going to impact the photo periods of all the plants in the area and the birds. When you talk about the birds, I take care of a soccer field at West Sunset on the Flyway. 30 or 40 species a year come there and land. They feed there, they rest there, they fertilize there. So there's a lot of other impacts here. I'd like to see this included in, I'd like to see this type of stat come out of this report. I know there's a lot of other emotions in the room and everything else. I think some of the other issues are political and are probably better served at the Park Commission, etc. than here. But as far as the EIR goes, I hope to say that they look at such things as the Coastal Commission's rules and other people that have have some sort of jurisdiction over this area. And it was brought up earlier about after 8 years, when you have to strip this stuff off, are we just taking our problem of plastic and putting it in another dump somewhere else and somebody else's problem? Because this stuff does not recycle. We're coating 6 acres or 7 acres of our natural jewel in plastic, and that has to have an impact, and we need to make sure that we don't do a long-term adverse impact to Golden Gate Park. Thanks.
I'm a member of Planning Association for the Richmond and Coalition to Save Ocean Beach and Friends of Sutro Park. Fundamentally, I think there's a false premise here that somehow artificial fields here are going to be better. They're not. Real soccer is played on real grass fields. If there are any deficiencies in these particular fields, these can readily be made up with a little bit more money. I'll address that a little bit later. Now, also, I think this is a bait and switch. We hear so much about the need for children to be able to play on these fields. If you look through the numbers closely, you will find that essentially what we really see is an increase in the amount of playing time available at night for adults. This is a very different thing than what we are told. The Golden Gate Master Plan specifically says that the western end of the park has to be sylvan. It has to remain undeveloped. This is an artificial, lit-up athletic facility. It is the opposite of maintaining a sylvan environment. This plan is going to cost trees, wildlife, habitat, nature, and the serenity, not only for the creatures in the park, but for those of us who live around it. With regard to the dollars and costs, which hasn't been addressed and may or may not be part of the EIR, but I think is certainly something to discuss in this public forum. The city has to pay over $6 million and set aside $200,000 a year for replacement cost. Just looking at the replacement cost, if you had $200,000, you could hire a couple more groundskeepers and replace a grass field every other year. With regard to the comments that you've already heard about the rubber being thrown into the park, I do think it's absolutely a requirement under the law for the EIR to consider the fact that we now have a plan to be using the water that is now going to be leaching through all these tons of rubber. With regard to the presentation, there had been a presentation from the City Parks Foundation to Coalition to Save Ocean Beach, in which they showed us pictures that they had doctored up as to what this would look like from Sutro Park. And according to these pictures, you couldn't even see it. This is so palpably false Obviously, if you're on Sutro Park and you're looking down onto these 60-foot-high lights and lit-up fields, it is going to be a complete change in the nature of what you're seeing there. That sort of thing so loses the credibility of those people who are presenting this. Now, there's a city policy to encourage the use of Thank you. City policy to encourage the use of school fields. This benefits those people who want to play soccer in the place where they are playing it. And lastly, Golden Gate Park has millions of visitors. McLaren Park is underused. If you're going to create an artificial facility, that would be an excellent location for it. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Ellen Coivisto and then John Imparato.
Hi, I'm a neighbor who lives 3 blocks from the park. I commute by bike through the park every day to the public school where I teach, and I've used this section of the park regularly for over 30 years. The EIR for the artificial turf soccer fields and stadium lighting must address the following concerns. 1, lack of neighborhood access to large swaths of the western end of the park. I used to teach at a private school at 46th and Irving, and we would go there and play every Friday, every week for 6 years. It's now fenced in and inaccessible except for money. 2, crumb rubber flowing into the ocean. I collected evidence of crumb rubber flow into storm drains from the South Sunset Playground last winter. I've got numbers for it as well as acreage and the whole bit. The conditions for crumb rubber migration into the ocean from soccer fields across the street from the beach can only be much greater. The effects of crumb rubber ingestion by birds, fish, and other wildlife, that's point 3. Does crumb rubber collect in bird gullets? Does it bioaccumulate up the food chain? What animal studies have been done on lead, arsenic, cadmium, and the other ingredients in ground-up tires? 4, the condition of the western windbreak. Anyone who lives in the area is intimately aware that the park exists because of that windbreak, yet this project threatens it in multiple ways. 5, the effects of nighttime lighting on birds and insects, especially the endangered snowy plover, who lives right across the street, and the raptors who hunt in this area. 6, the light pollution and destruction of scenic and astronomical viewing options for all of the western San Francisco and the Marin headlands. These lights will be visible all up and down the coast. The light studies must include information giving lumens per distance and need to include consideration of glare magnification caused by the fog. 7, safety issues involved with change in the opening hours of the park, since the fields will be rented out after sundown. The park's open sunrise to sundown. Who will be responsible and who will patrol? 8, safety issues involving artificial turf flammability and toxic smoke. Tires burn. In the east, where these fields are older, they have many instances of these fields burning. 9, aesthetic issues involving tagging and otherwise defacing the artificial turf surfaces. 10, safety issues involving Prop 65 notices for the field, since they would contain multiple substances necessitating Prop 65 notification to users. 11, effects of ingestion or inhalation of crumb rubber once it degrades to nanoparticle size, especially for PAHs, lead, and other acute respiratory or neurological toxins or carcinogens. 12, the disposal of the toxic turf after it's finished its life cycle. 13, toxins leached from the artificial turf into runoff the ocean and the aquifer. Has the California Coastal Commission been contacted about this? 14, the impact in noise pollution, congestion, soot, diesel exhaust, and carbon dioxide, as well as reduced road safety due to the greater amount of traffic forecast for the artificial turf fields. The impacts of increased traffic for marathons and concerts is enormous in this area, as we know because we live here, and the estimates given for traffic increase by these fields matches the traffic for those events. 15, the impact on tourism and local businesses of this expansion and commercialization of the park. As I understand it, that would be a financial consideration, so not a concern in the EIR. 16, the lack of compliance with the master plan for Golden Gate Park, wherein the western end of this park is designated for pastoral landscapes. Thank you.
Thank you.